Hey, everybody, welcome to the Crit House. I'm Jeff Larson, and we are continuing our MyFIVE series with Jamie Windsor, who I met through his YouTube channel. Jamie, it's great to have you here on the Crit
Be
House
here.
for the MyFIVE
Great to be
series.
here.
Yeah. So I'm gonna introduce you as a photographer, but I know you're more than that. You're a designer and do other things graphically. But your YouTube channel has been very well received, I would say. It's certainly something that I often go to receive inspiration and wisdom, and when I'm sort of wrestling with different thoughts photographically. Maybe you can just like tell everybody how you think of yourself, either as a photographer or as a creative.
Um, I would I would describe myself as probably as uh an artist who has difficulty deciding on which discipline to follow. So now I make videos about photography that are quite graphic. So it's kind of the best way I can sort of merge all those things together. I make videos about things that interest me.
That's perfect. I've always found your videos to be just so thoughtful, which is one of the reasons I sort of gravitated to them. Is just they're thoughtful and enriching. So thank you for that. So
Thank you.
we're going to look at your 5 images shortly, but so I
Mhm.
asked you to take, say, come on and say, okay, show 5 images that had some meaning to you. And I know some people
Yes.
find that hard, and some people go, oh, here are my 5 images. What did you go through when you were thinking about what your 5 images would be?
Right. Well, I suppose I have cheated slightly in that I am not really much of a single image kind of
Mhm.
person. So there's quite a few images in here that are an example of a wider project that I just find fascinating. I just kind of tried to work intuitively and tried to think like what has the most kind of emotional resonance for me and what has affected my outlook and my practice.
5 images. Now we're actually going to show more than 5 images, but there are fundamentally five
Yeah,
uh, pieces. Let's put it that way. There are 5 pieces, and we're going to start with
yeah.
Wolfgang Tillmans.
It's quite an early project for him. And Wolfgang Tillmans was really one of the people who first really got me interested in photography because I'd already started doing photography, but I think his work spoke to me in a way that when other work didn't, when I was being a bit more analytical, when I was looking at kind of the kind of rules of composition and lighting and all that stuff. And then I think Wolfgang Tillman introduced me to the idea that photography can have an emotional kind of resonance and a narrative. But talking about this piece in particular, it's a piece about Concord and the kind of paradoxical contradictions of this image of modern technological process. Concord was very kind of noisy and expensive and cramped and actually quite boring to ride and an environmental nightmare, but it was quite a spectacle, I think, if you saw it from the ground and you felt kind of special and stuff. Because this really inspired me to start a photographic project of my own. And it was that photographic project where I started working in a different way than I had done before. So, kind of appropriate for uh, the date we're recording this, which is September the 11th, because everyone remembers the tragic events of September the 11th in 2001.
Yes.
But fewer people probably remember the American Airlines flight 587 that crashed in New York 9 weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
It came down in Queens, and
Yes.
that wasn't nothing to do with terrorism. It was a pilot error. But I was going to New York at the time. We went, and security was off the scale at the airport, and everyone was very tense. And
Mm-hmm.
as we were meant to be landing in JFK, the this plane crash happened in Queens, and they diverted us to Montreal,
Mm.
and we had to sort of sit and wait there. We weren't allowed off the plane, but they wouldn't tell us what had happened, and they kept saying there's been an incident. so the Wolfgang Tillmans project of Concord stuck out in my mind because of I was looking at that sort of before, and then it kind of changed for me because suddenly images of planes had this completely different meaning. If we kind of look at image one, so this is just one of them. It's just this grid of like images of Concord kind of taking off that he took around Heathrow Airport in London. And so from this one, what I found interesting is that we can see where it is. There's a sign that says Hatton Cross, which is the next tube on from Heathrow, if you know London. So this holds more interest for me because it shows like a bit of afterburn sort of against this gradient of the sky and just at the top of a street lamp. And it just has an atmosphere for me, and it raises questions because it makes me think about kind of like, what is the shot of, like why does it exist? It makes things take on a personal meaning that maybe the artist didn't intend. I think Roland Barthes touches on this in Camera Lucida when he talks about the punctum in a photograph, which is like the personal meaning, the bit that grabs us and creates that emotional connection. And this sort of just started me taking my own photographic project where I started documenting the sky in different places that I visited. And it ended up being one of the main pieces for my degree. And this was a particular turning point for me because I remember not really understanding what it was and feeling quite worried that I didn't have a reason, and going to my tutor and saying, I want to start this photographic project where I document the sky, but I don't really know why. And I remember him saying, kind of do it because there will be a reason and you'll kind of discover it by doing it. And this sort of taught me to work intuitively rather than analytically. Yeah.
This is your second image. Let's talk about Darren Almond.
Yeah, Darren Almond. So I first saw Darren Almond's work I've got a vague memory of this. It was in a gallery. It might have been in London. It could have been Paris. I do remember it having a really big impact on me. And I've picked this one image, but this is an example image from a wider set. Mm-hmm. So I'm quite obsessed with images that stir. There's a certain feeling that certain images stir in me, and it's kind of a dreamlike feeling. It's quite surreal. But it's like I'm awakening a memory I've forgotten, but there's a sinister undertone to it. And this is really present for me in Darren Almond's Full Moon in his Nocturne series. But Darren Almond, basically, he goes to these very remote locations and he does these long exposures at night on a full moon. And they look like the day, but not quite. And they kind of hit that sort of uncanny valley sort of thing for me, and this absolute lack of any sort of anthropogenic impact on these environments. It creates a real sense of isolation and loneliness, and it invokes almost like a sort of a primal fear in me, but it's a fear kind of laced with curiosity. I'm just really fascinated by that. Yeah, I just love his work because it has this kind of real emotional impact on me.
Another tearjerker from Ed Clark.
Yeah. So Navy bandsman Graham Jackson by Ed Clark. I've put this one in because I think if someone asked me to show them an example of a perfect photo, I think you'd be hard pushed to come closer than this. Because firstly, we have all the normal sort of compositional rules just executed so effortlessly. We've got like a perfect kind of rule of thirds in play where it's using the rule of thirds, but it's balanced and it's not kind of weighted. And he's standing out against that white pillar, and there's a light sort of highlighting his face, highlighting these tears coming down his face. So you've got all that, but it's more than that as well. And it says something to me about photography, because it captures this guy's emotions so perfectly, and in context with what we know of the time and kind of Roosevelt's efforts on behalf of the civil rights movement, and it educates us a little bit about political history, but in a very humanizing way, and in a way that maybe sort of, dates and facts can't communicate. And ultimately, this ability to carry an emotional narrative is one of the reasons that photography is such a powerful medium.
You've included a Todd Hido image, and he has a
Yeah.
number of these that Todd Hido has always uh, I mean, it put you in an emotional place. It's something that's a little bit surreal.
Yeah.
Um, love this this project and this image. Talk about this, sir.
Yeah. So this is not too dissimilar to how the Darren Almond piece affects me. Um, again, it sort of hits that emotional spark in me. But I kind of like this feeling of isolation that you get from these images. There's something about the fact that these images are shot with a fairly kind of standard focal length at eye level and without figures in the shots. And so we're again, we put ourselves in that space. We imagine us sort of walking through these places. And it makes us kind of create our own narrative. For me, it feels like there's a story to be unearthed. It's like what's going on in these illuminated rooms. But it creates a sense of nostalgia for me. But even though I've never even been anywhere like these
Mhm.
suburban American neighborhoods that he shoots in.
Your number 5 is from Nan Golden, who we have had a master's conversation on the Crit House, which we'll link to at the end
Right.
of this. She is amazing in her photography, and you chose this image.
Yes. This is one called Jens and Clemens Embracing Paris 2001. It's from her Beautiful Smile project. This is probably the project that this is just an example image, but more than just a project. It's because I want to talk about her slideshows. I think her images work better when they're not in single image format, when it's this collection, and she does these slideshows where she shows like for about 30, 45-minute kind of slideshows
Yep,
of
hundreds of images set to music,
hundreds of
right?
images
Yeah.
to music. And she is absolutely, definitely, possibly my favorite photographer, definitely one of my favorite photographers, because she has a unique ability to bring her audience into her world that resonates on a really visceral level. One thing I really like about her is there's a genuine sense of compassionate respect for her subjects. There's no negative judgment in her shot. Her work really lacks an arrogance. It's very humble, but it's deep. So I would always urge anyone, if she's got an exhibition on, you have a chance to go see one of her slideshows, just go and see it, because they're just such an amazing experience and a real testament to the power of photography and its ability to convey emotional truths. And there's so much more than sort of mere documentation.
Well, I have never had the opportunity to see one of her slideshows, but I will certainly jump on it if it ever comes to pass that it's an
Absolutely,
opportunity. So
they are one of my favorite things to do in the world, is to just go and see one of her slideshows and just see the whole thing from start to finish, and
yeah.
you feel it so much. Well, I
Jamie,
do
this
at least.
was I can see that. So the 5 great projects, images to discuss.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. It's hearing you talk about these things. It brought so much to the images and to the projects that I would not have seen otherwise. So thank you for sharing that with us. And for you viewers out there, if you are interested in possibly participating in the MyFIVE series, if you want to take your 5 images and post them on Instagram with the MyFIVE hashtag and then tag us at the Crit House, we will perhaps have you on our program and talk about your 5 images. Jamie Windsor, it has been just a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for everyone for watching The Crit House.